from my new book, Belmont Portfolio Poems. I'm reading part 2 of the book, and the part 2 consists of 7 sections. And the epigraph to part 2 comes from T.S. Eliot, and in a sense describes the theme, if you want, of the whole book, but especially the part 2. And the quote from T.S. Eliot, 4 quartets, reads, "The end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." Belmont Portfolio Poems, Part 2. What remains to be said, written, and sung? We have been to the end of history and back again. We have returned from cities of perfection, come again to narrow lanes of Belmont, sat in the King's Halls of Cambridge, re-entered Marchand, walked with laureates in Boston, Stockholm, Castries, climbed hills of shanties above Fort-de-France, laughed with reggae stars and Kaizo kings, strolled pagodas in Tokyo, temples in Kyoto, and prayed in simple pews of village churches. Love has left wrinkled skins of loneliness, children gone to far countries as they must, lovers distracted by diversions of age, and old flames rekindling dead wood. What remains to be sung, made poetry of all those gone so quickly ours? All of it, I guess, that voyage of a life, if you are brave enough to find metaphors of the metaphysical in it, in all the messy stuff, the sacred and the sacramental in certain failures, in bird call insisting, pup saying something to a goat in the yard, compa music coming up the hill, child shrieking somewhere in a house, and so on, all of it there, in your present timeline, in your hearing now threading that life and its inebriated days, your weary hunger for affection, for affirmation, the shifty-eyed hope of faith, of redemption, years inevitably winding in their spiral to that moment of the epilogue of your biography. So write it down and say it like a griot, sing it strong like a chanteuse over shack drums and violon, like Bob Marley still wailing from passing vans over the lost cities of yards. Over the lost cities of yards, unchanged sprawl of townships, hill-squatting favelas, impossible Asian slums, inner cities invisible to their Fifth and other avenues. Drones and multiple Orwellian eyes cruise among gulls, hawks, and vultures, while skies over Sudan, Palestine, Ukraine, and such places shower meteors of fire and germs upon children and the old, hiding under their denuded masonry of homes. Inflation, supply chain shortages, fuel prices enter our partisan quarrels, local gossip, pandemic shadowed lives. And we try to see Irina in Kyiv, playing Chopin on her ash-covered piano in the bombed-out debris of her house. What do we see? What does it mean? What epiphany under that apocalypse? What imagination confronts unreasoning tyranny with defiant cause? What Shekinah sets tongues of fire in the streets, shatters glass underfoot, and sent this etude to us as certain accounting? To apostate patriarchs, right-wing religious, and pew warmers who applaud invasion of coveted territories and capitals, mass graves of disappeared patriots, thefts of voting rights, knees of bigots in black men's necks, children in cages at borders, and all such discriminations against the imago Dei in skins and bodies they despise. What do they know of the transcendent, the immanent, the presence of the sacred icon they carry in Pharisaic processions, behind ancient gold crosses on which they crucify afresh the hated, betrayed, raped, bombed, the massacred children, the Lord Emmanuel? What do they know? What do they know? They and their cabals of oligarchs, bankers, generals, crime bosses, and petty clerks, of petroglyphs of memorials in ancient texts, of fluted psalms in forgotten catacombs, of Sumerian tablets relating diluvian epics stored in lost grottos, of trumpets roosting in apocalyptic pages, of blues harmonicas in late-night clubs, of blind singers in halls of arrogant empires, and Creole lamentations on aching violons, of reggae prophets in trench-town gullies, folk chanters every time, everywhere, chanting down Babylon, pushing back beasts of earth and sea, heart crying from roots of keyboards, the certain accounting, beyond here, beyond now, from time, from far, trotting to its Zion, from inferno to paradiso, through this purgatorio. Through this purgatorio we press on, island travelers, companioned with faithful, patient guides, poets, players of strings and horns, cantors of songs, Bunny Wailer, Patrick Saint-Éloi, Walcott Camau, Billie Holiday, Cécile Descartes, metaphysical masters, psalmists, mighty prophets, the disciples of the Ascension, and all that went before, and all that is to come. I have not forgotten the friends of those young years, including Alwyn, Milton, Lelia, David, Theodora, and Carlton, Eichel, Fish, Pat Paber. Our music, Elton John, Carole King, Marley, Jimmy Cliff, and reggae icons, Zouk and Compas, Kassav, Malavoie, Schleu, Exile One, Tabou Combo, the St. Lucian dance bands and folk musicians with clear-rooted voices, and theatre, the first poems, parties, loves, the yards, and all else. Today, they are imagined narratives of drifting thoughts with all those gone hours. Gone to their travels, you wonder if your remembrances are the same. We return from, we return to, become stranger to the once familiar. But you have become a stranger too, collared in faith in agnostic seasons, cloistered in chapters of a meta-narrative largely discredited, proclaiming apocalypse, not idealistic democratic or Marxist future, calling the unthinking church to search its secretive corners. These days, death is the familiar masked interloper, separating faces in telebituaries from all they once held dear, their barbecued pork, their living rooms, beds, cars, phones, their books, their pulpits, islands and cities they loved in, their prizes, their money in the bank, favorite children, partners, seeing, hearing, breathing, and they die, and with its eulogies, faith must tread carefully. Faith must tread carefully, sandaled with the truth you wear, as sparing with praise as a Japanese woodblock print, lacing the essentials with fine lines of compassionate portraiture, leaving spaces within the frames for wreaths of cherry blossoms or bougainvillea cascading. In these seaside cemeteries of small towns, we are not theocracies. Forgotten autocrats decay alongside revered democrats. Rastas share the palimpsest of sand with Vatican, Muslim with Hindu, gay with straight, believers with unbelievers, and political flags rot entangled between graves. Only love will rise from the dead into the presence of the Almighty. How you translate this is your business. In the supermarket, I see a photograph of a man I vaguely knew, above a book for written condolences, while hidden speakers pipe popular music, the day's hits, which young people passing between shelves are singing. Is it Bruno Mars, Savannah Chronics? I'm dropping names of the few I know, suspect I'm wrong. But standing in line to the checkout, I would dance if I could, something creative, something stretched, extended like Rex Nettleford, against all the entombing thoughts, ghosting up too often now, haunting against my faith in the tree of life, my certainty of the empty tomb, my ancient treasured map to the city of God, my island pilgrim's progress. My island pilgrim's progress, St. Lucian, through a Caribbean parish of blue-hued hills, surf over veined ocean, beaches that have always been there, scissor-tailed seabirds that translate the metaphysics of my metaphors into sacramental messengers, bringing exegesis of sacred texts, gliding into poems that circle the fauna and flora of this creation, and the parting veils of the promised new beginning. Through the capital of Castries, Creole villages down the coast, the intriguing lives, their complexities, their fundamental mystery, their drums and violons, shak-shak and mandolin, chanterelles and dances and wop-duet, wailers, reggae and shadow kaiser in the bars, and yes, new generations of a digital age. Rough-edged, pants below hips, tattoos across breasts, music, hardcore and dancehall, but it's complicated, and judgment must be compassionate. Through this island today, racked by politics and religion, theatre, bookshops, libraries, galleries in decline, media with its wearying gossip of talk shows, incessant, incomprehensible noise, add contentious democracies of internet, feeding insatiable desires of sidewalks, marketplaces, watering holes. But then, approaching mid-70s, what do I know? Poet and preacher, is this an enigma of arrival? the predictable pilgrim's progress to the celestial city, to Paradiso, the Odyssey, and a return from, a return to of the prodigal, past inevitable fatigue, to speak plainly. In poetry surfing his brooding lines, this island pilgrim bears the Caribbean voice to the table of world literature, placing there in canticles our accents, our history, our songs, our dances, that in particular celebrate our apprehensions of the sacred, the divine, the transcendent, the immanent, the Alpha and Omega, the Holy City, the incarnate Christ, Pantocrator. Amen. Belmont Portfolio, Part 2, my own Caribbean Pilgrim's Progress, as it were.
Tu te dis, ça me te dit pas vrai. Lui-même te dit, ça me te fait pas bon. Il te qu'à quoi, ça me te fait pas bon. Il dit, il prend nos moins, allez, Haïti, plier.